Thank you for joining us again tonight, and thank you for faithfully coming in and just spending a little time to learn about the foundational truths of the gospel of Jesus Christ. The reason we're doing this is because people are so busy, and we want to get a little bit of time for people to understand the foundation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I certainly appreciate your watching and all the comments that people are making on Facebook. And I encourage you to tell other people so that they can understand. Just a few minutes every night will change your biblical understanding and give you a greater appreciation of what God has done for us. We've been talking about Abraham, the father of our faith. And very briefly, Abraham came from the Ur of Chaldees in southern Iraq, went up to southern Turkey, which was called at that time Haran, about 500 miles. Spent a few years there. His father died. God called him to come down to Canaan land, to the promised land, that he says, I'm going to take you to a land that I will show and give to you. Abraham came in, and he came into the promises of God there, first at Shechem, then down to Ai, and then over to Bethel, the house of God. And there he built an altar and called on the name of the Lord. But the promised land was not exactly what he anticipated, because when he came to Bethel, it was there that there was great famine in the land. And in Genesis chapter 12, verse 10, and there was famine in the land, and Abraham went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. He came to the promised land, and there he found a famine, a lack of refurbishing, of replenishing. There was no rain, no crops, no food, and there was no replenishing of the food that was rapidly being consumed. And it says that Abram went down to Egypt. And to briefly just tell the story, he went down to Egypt. There he saw the immorality of the Egyptians. They were corrupt. The officials were corrupt. And he got afraid. He got afraid because his wife was so beautiful that they would kill him and take her into Pharaoh's harem. And indeed, that's basically what happened. They didn't kill Abram because he told Sarah, said, just tell him that you're my brother, and that you are you are the sister, my sister, and I am your brother. And so that's perpetuated a half-truth, because in reality, Sarah probably was the daughter of Abraham's brother Haran that had died in the Ur of the Chaldees. And Abram took her as his wife and referred to her as his sister. Now, folks, we refer to everybody in the family of God as brothers and sisters. You know, my brother so-and-so, my sister so-and-so. Even they are not our biological sisters. They are our sisters in the family of God. So Abraham told a half-truth. And there, Pharaoh eventually took her. And he basically, Abram was the kind of guardian of, quote, his sister, his wife. And Pharaoh, in courting her, lavished a lot of gifts on Abraham. Gold and silver, donkeys, camels, sheep, men servants, maid servants. And Abraham became very wealthy and won the favor of the higher-ups of the Egyptian Pharaoh at the time. And then ultimately, Pharaoh figured out something was going on, because he saw Abraham sporting with his wife, or basically courting her. And Pharaoh also a judgment was placed on him, and he became very sick. And a lot of people believe that it was a sickness that kept Pharaoh from having intimate relationships with Sarah or anybody else. And Pharaoh figured it out. It was a judgment, and ultimately sent Abram and everything he had, escorted them out of Egypt. Now let's look at this story, and let's get a little bit deeper meaning of what's going on. There was famine in the land of Canaan. That means there was a lack. There wasn't replenishing. no rain, no food, no crops, nothing to restore what was being consumed. There was a lack there. I could never read in this story where God told Abraham himself, Abraham, I want you to go to Egypt. Because I think Abraham just looked at the lack of everything, and I believe his faith failed him a little bit, and he sojourned into Egypt on his own accord. In other words, he was looking at the circumstances instead of trusting and believing in God. And you know, a lot of times we will look at the circumstances of sickness and disease and problems in our life, and a lot of times that will cause our faith to fail, and we'll lose our trust and belief and following the things of God. You see, Abraham started reacting to his circumstances instead of acting on the promises of God. He started leaning on his own understanding instead of trusting in the Lord. He started telling half-truths instead of telling the whole truth about his wife. And ultimately, he started living in fear instead of in faith. And faith and fear are on the same seesaw, but just on different ends. And when your fear goes up, your faith goes down. But when you believe in the things of God and you hold on to the promises of God, your faith will go up and diminish the fear that's trying to assail you. And you can say, well, you know, he didn't do too bad down in Egypt. He got a lot of wealth. Even Sarah got a maidservant by the name of Hagar, and they were exposed to the world, so to say. But all those problems and all the wealth and all the maidservants actually became a problem that we'll see as we continue to study Genesis. Because when they got back into the promised land, the wealth caused them to separate, where Lot had to go to another direction. Hagar ultimately birthed an Ishmael in Abraham's life, and Lot got a taste of the world and ultimately started looking at through his own eyes instead of staying with the man of God, and ultimately brought destruction. I guess the take-home message is no matter what you're facing, even if it seems to be a famine in your life, God is still in control. Stay faithful to the things of God, and somehow, some way, God will bring you through, and you won't have a lot of extra baggage that you don't need by going your own direction.